So welcome to the beautiful, wild wilderness of Pennsylvania. And this is Dents Run. Of course, run is just another name for a creek. Man, it's beautiful. But man, we got a story to tell you. So we are in north central Pennsylvania, heading towards northwest Pennsylvania. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure which county I'm in at the moment. I was in Elk County most of the day. I know at some point along Route 555 I crossed into Cameron County, but now I'm not quite sure. There's a road runs along a creek called Dents Run Road. I drove along that for a while, so I might be back in Elk County. I'm not exactly sure. Doesn't really matter though, but just letting you kind of know where I am. Not too far from the elk viewing areas here in Pennsylvania. The Elk Country Visitor Center, those places. But yeah, this is where our story takes place. I don't know about the exact spot where the gold was, or still is, but we're nearby. I'm gonna find a cozy spot and we'll have a chat about this story, walk along the creek. And it's an interesting story, not just because it's Pennsylvania legend, but because it extends into modern times, and into very recent modern times actually. It's still an ongoing issue. And as always with all stories and legends, you have to bear in mind that depending on what research you do, where you do research, who you talk to, who you hear from, there's always gonna be different versions and different varieties of the same story. Let's tell the initial story first of what happened, of what originated this legend, and I'll tell you a little bit some of my feelings about it. Initially I had some kind of doubts about this legend. It's similar to a lot of other legends in Pennsylvania where someone had gold or silver and then they buried it in the woods and never went back to get it, and people are still out there looking for it. So it's a similar type of story, but this is from the Civil War era, 1863. And as the story goes, there was a Lieutenant Castleton with, I think, about 10 other soldiers who were transporting some gold from Wheeling, Virginia. They're going to take it to Philadelphia, to the Philadelphia Mint, and it was going to be used as pay for Union soldiers. And instead of, I guess, taking the easy way, which would have been by railroad through kind of like southern Pennsylvania, or maybe like the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. But of course it was a Civil War, and that area was a hotbed of activity, so they took it through the kind of north and into the wilds of Pennsylvania, which I'm not sure was really a good idea. Because even today, this is wild country. Even if you're from like Elk County, Forest County, Cameron County, it's a pretty wild area. And once they got to this area, they hired a guide to lead them through the area, because if you're not from the area, even today, if you're not from the area, you might easily get lost. And that's what they did anyway. Actually, I think the story goes the guide just left them. It stole some of their horses, so that's kind of fishy. And then they didn't know where they were, like going around in circles, and finally, I think Castleton got sick, and they just stopped. I think one story says they split up. Some went to get help, some stayed with the gold, and that was it. No one ever heard of the gold or the men ever again. Well, I shouldn't say they never heard of the men or the gold again. They did. I should say they never saw any of the men or the gold again. Now, there's different stories out there too of what happened. Like, you remember that guide they hired who kind of left and stole their horses. There's stories out there about certain men. They were ambushed by certain locals who realized what they were carrying. They were carrying the gold in false bottom wagons to keep it hidden. The journey was supposed to be secret, because I think they were carrying 52 gold bars. Yeah, I forgot to say at the beginning. There's a lot of gold they were carrying, supposedly. 52 gold bars, which weighed like 50 pounds each. So it was a lot. It was a lot of gold. It was a treasure. So if people found out about it, yeah, they'd go looking for it. So there's stories that these locals ambushed them, and that the local guide was a part of that. And that most of the soldiers were killed. Of course, there was bragging about it in local taverns and stuff, and that's how people heard about the story and heard about the gold. And then, of course, over time, many different stories got handed down. Many of the locals claimed to know where that gold was hidden, where it was buried in a cave or in one of these valleys or hollows. That's what the story says. Like when they got sick, one version says that when they split up, the soldiers, that they hid the gold. Another version says that the people that ambushed them hid the gold and never went back to get it. Several different locals have claimed to have found some of the gold bars by coming out looking for them. There's even a legend too that further up the valley here in a place called Bell's Hollow, that 7 skeletons were found. Supposedly, those were the skeletons of 7 of that company of soldiers, of 10. That's where they were murdered. And like I said, there's all different versions and aspects to the story depending on where you do your research and who you hear from. We'll sit down again. I'm going to tell you why I initially had my doubts about this story. And when I first researched this years ago, those were my doubts, and I wasn't quite sure that I believed that any gold was ever even transported through this area. There were some things that didn't quite make sense to me. But then later in the video, you'll find out why that's all changed, because things happened since I first did my research that vastly changed my opinion about things. Yes, like I said, I had my initial doubts about this story. Some parts of it just didn't really seem to make sense. You know, I mentioned there's already a lot of other similar stories in some ways. They're not all like Civil War era time, but of, you know, people losing their gold or silver and not being able to find it again, or they intended to go back and find it and they died and now no one knows where it is exactly, but it's out there somewhere. But yeah, too, like 52 bars of gold, that's a lot of gold to send with just 10 soldiers. That didn't like make sense to me. Why? Normally you would send a lot more soldiers than that to guard that much gold. That didn't really see. I know they were hiding it in like false bottom wagons, but still, you know, if word gets out that that's what you're carrying, which it almost always does, word almost always gets out, you know, you're a target with just 10 soldiers. Yeah, it doesn't really seem. I doubt they would send that amount of gold with just that few soldiers. And why they would come all the way up into the wilds of Elk County, Pennsylvania, that didn't quite make sense either. I know they're trying to be safe, trying to avoid a southern route where, you know, Confederate troops could, got bugs in my glasses, where Confederate troops could potentially raid and attack. So, but this seems it's a little bit too far north, unless they got lost. Like I said, they did kind of get lost along the way. I know some stories said that they were carrying the gold to Harrisburg rather than to Philly, but taking it to Philly makes more sense because that is where the U.S. Mint is, in Philly, not Harrisburg. But even then, they didn't really pay the soldiers in gold. They weren't going to mint it in gold coins and pay the soldiers in gold. They didn't get paid in gold. But of course, back then, you know, whatever you got paid, it was backed up in gold, so maybe that had something to do with it. But parts of it just didn't really seem to fit, and I kind of dismissed the story. Maybe it was a cool story. It was a story maybe I would tell anyway in a video like this, with you know, with it's one of those things you can believe or not. But then, like I said, things changed. Yeah, so like I said, that all changed. Some time ago, a father and son team, there may have been more others involved at some point, but I believe their names were Dennis and Ken Prada. I think that's what son's name was. They had a group called Finders Keepers. It's like a treasure hunting group where they would research different lost treasures and try to find them. And this is one that they latched onto, said, we're going to find out if this story is true. So they came to this area along Dents Run, but not necessarily this area. Like I said, I don't know where the exact spot is, but they did their research, looked through a lot more records, and they eventually found a cave. Now, I'm not exactly sure where that cave is or how big it was, but they found it to be intriguing, and they brought some instruments along, you know, metal detectors and other expensive equipment. And I think as they dug into the cave a little bit, well, I don't think they dug right away because it was on state land. I believe this is state forest land. You can't just go digging around state forest land without permission. But I guess they crawled in, and they found what they thought was a man-made wall in there. Their machines detected metallic substances on the other side of that wall, and the machines were telling them that it was gold, that there was something gold back there. So that got interesting, and they wanted permission from the state, obviously, to dig back there, and I think they had a lot of trouble initially getting permission from the state to do that. I think there was a legal battle for quite a few years on trying to get permission to do that. And so the big question is, did they ever get permission to dig here, and did they find anything? I think they did get permission to do a little bit small scale digging. I think they were allowed to do some test holes and test drills to see what was back there. Some of their tests, those tests proved even more interesting actually. They were convinced there was gold back there, but they never actually got to whatever it was, they never actually got to dig it out. This story caught the attention of someone else. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, yeah, the FBI, came out here. There's a man named Archer who caught wind of the story. I forget if he was actually contacted by the father and son team, but yeah, the FBI came out here. They came out here in force with machinery, their own equipment. Yeah, I mean, this was back in 2018, March 13th of 2018, so it was not that long ago at all. So when I say this comes into modern history, it does. And there's ongoing court battles even today because of it. Yeah, the FBI came out here. Yeah, so word was getting out about what was potentially here at Dents Run, and we're dealing with that amount of gold. It gets people's attention, whether or not it's true. And already some state lawmakers had contacted the father and son team, and one had made a deal with him that he would get some of the gold, like 3 bars of it or something like that, and in return he would keep other state authorities away from them and stuff like that. So people were cutting, deals like that. Yeah, but then, like I said, the FBI came. This is where it gets interesting. This is what changed my mind about this story. Why would the FBI come out just to investigate a legend? If that's all it was a legend, why would the FBI show up? That's interesting. And of course, the FBI did their own investigation. This guy I think his name was Archer. He did his own research on the story, and they brought their own equipment. They brought even more expensive and better equipment, something called a gravimeter, which they brought back there, and they tested the same cave area, and their tests showed that there was gold back there too. In fact, their tests showed that there was like 9 tons of gold back there, or whatever was back there was roughly the density of gold. So I mean, it was pretty convincing that there was something back there. And then of course the FBI did dig it up then. But what exactly did they dig up? And according to the FBI, it was nothing. Really? And sometime before the digging even began, or maybe even before the FBI showed up, a verbal agreement was made with the father and son that they would be allowed to watch, at least watch. But when the time came to actually dig the site up, they were confined to a car. They were not allowed to actually watch the FBI dig whatever was there up. And then when the digging was done, the FBI came back and told them, brought them to the hole, showed them an empty hole and said, hey, there's nothing in here. You guys are wrong. And those two, it says, I think one site said they felt like idiots, like, there was nothing there. But you should start to see that none of that really makes any sense. Because why would the FBI go to all the effort to dig? I mean, they brought in like heavy equipment and stuff. Why would they dig if there was nothing there? Like I said, their instruments showed, the father and son team, Dennis and Ken, their instruments showed that something was there. The FBI brought in their instruments and it said that there was something there. And then the FBI went to the effort to dig. If their instruments said there was nothing there, they wouldn't have dug, but they did. So when your instruments say that there's that much metal, whatever it is down there, there's going to be something down there. Even if it's not gold, there was something down there. There was nothing. And then, of course, the father and son team, at first they felt defeated, but then they started to look into it more and thought, this doesn't make any sense. So they requested to see the report. The FBI, all those government agencies, they write up a report. They have video footage of the whole thing. They wanted to see the report, what it said, but they weren't allowed to. It was kept secret from them, kept secret from everybody. I think the report was like 1,000 pages or so. They had all kinds of video footage, but no one's allowed to see it. Well, how does that make sense? If they found nothing, then why would it hurt to have people to read the report or to watch the video? And if there's nothing found, who cares? But why keep it secret? Why keep the report and the footage secret if nothing was found? Yeah, so it's that interaction with the FBI, them coming here and digging, all their research, all their equipment, digging. The fact that they even came here to this area, I mean, look, the FBI were here. I mean, not at this exact spot, but they came here to the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, to dig a hole, and they say they found nothing. Yeah, I don't believe that one bit. So what did they find? Was it the gold of the story I mentioned? Archer did his own research, the FBI agent guy, and the name Castleton and the name of the sergeant that was in that group, I think his last name was O'Rourke, he couldn't find their names in any of the records from that time, the Civil War Army records and stuff. Their names weren't there, so that put some doubts on the story too. But there obviously something happened in this area. a lot of these times these legends, they might not be entirely true, but there's a kernel of truth to them. So something, because it's that kind of legend and history is embedded in the lore of this area. Almost every place you go, there's a slightly different version of the story and where that gold was hidden. Some people say the gold wasn't in Dents Run, but it was another hollow nearby or something like that. So something happened through here. Did some gold come through here or something else? Was it, were there's men not U.S. Army soldiers from the Civil War? Were they just pretending to be? Something like that. And also another fellow, I forget his name, but he kind of showed up on the scene too. I think he was here for the dig. He wasn't allowed to see it either, but he claimed that that gold belonged to what's called the Knights of the Golden Circle. I think I got that name right. It was a group that was, Confederate sympathizers, I guess you could call them. They were kind of hoarding gold and silver to help the Confederacy. There's a whole lot more to that group in that story, but he claimed that that gold was theirs. They were hiding it there, eventually to take it south to the Confederacy. So that's where he said it was from. That's just another spin on the story. Yes, that father and son, they're still fighting court battles to try and get those documents released that they can read them to find out exactly what was found. I think some information was released just this year in 2021. It was, I think, Archer or whoever, the FBI admitted that they came up with a warrant to come out here and seize this, whatever it was in there, because they were worried that the state of Pennsylvania would seize whatever was in there and claim it for themselves, according to some abandoned gold law or something. So it was getting interesting. And in fact, Dennis and his son had placed cameras, hidden cameras at the site. And they discovered that even some Pennsylvania authorities or lawmakers or whoever they were had showed up at the site too prior to the FBI coming here, and they had tried to dig into the site to find whatever was there, but they weren't able to do so. They probably didn't come with enough equipment. I mean, the FBI came with like backhoes and stuff, I think. So eventually, authorities were looking for the stuff, not just the FBI, but state authorities too here in Pennsylvania. So maybe the FBI knew about that and they decided just to act and come out here themselves. So did the FBI find something out here? Yes, I'm almost positive they did. Like I said, why are they keeping it secret? Why would they even come out here and dig? I mean, their instrumentation told them. The FBI's expensive instrumentation, gravimeters and everything, it told them there was something back there and that it was probably gold and that it was big. They found something. Was it the gold of the story? I'm not sure. Like I said, I think there might be some truth to that story. Is it the exact story that's told down? Probably not. Like it seems something seemed kind of fishy about it, but maybe, like I said, something came through here. Some gold of some sort maybe that was hid. Were they Civil War soldiers guarding it? I'm not so sure about that. Like I said, that's maybe the original story is probably lost at time as to what happened. But who knows? But yeah, I'm almost positive that there was something back here on a cave along Dents Run. Now obviously you can do your own research on it. It's pretty interesting. I haven't said everything about it. There's a lot more that could be said about it, but it's a fascinating story. Yeah, and if you believe the government is telling you the truth, too, man, yeah. Anyway, I could say a lot about that too. All right, yeah, so fascinating story. Like I said, when I first did research on this prior to 2018, the story itself was interesting, but then when I did research again, this new information came out about this whole thing with the FBI. That kind of transformed my thinking of this thing. So yeah, very interesting and intriguing story, and it's not over yet because there's still court proceedings going on to get access to those reports that the FBI made and the video footage to find out exactly what is going on here. So this story isn't over yet. So we'll keep my eye on things. But anyway, like I said, if you're more interested in this story, there's plenty of information online about the Dents Gold, the father and son team called, I think, Finders Keepers is their group. So yeah. All right, but as always, thanks for coming along on this little adventure, listening to me yap about this intriguing story, and I'll see you around.